Tell me if you've seen one of these advertisements.
Ratcheting wrenches, metric sizes 18, 19.
Temu's running a limited time promotion. You can get this for $0.
Zero? Does it even work?
Of course.
They're advertisements for tools, Chinese tools. And they often use women and a lot of jumping up and down. Some of you may have even been tempted to buy some of these tools.
World's most popular portable sawmill from Temu. It can turn huge logs into perfect firewood in no time.
Maybe you were convinced by the advertising.
I can't tell you how much I love this miter gauge set. I got it on Temu as a gift.
Or maybe you were convinced by the low prices.
Did you know that you can get this for free from Temu?
No way.
But the fact is that we have been flooded and inundated with tons of Chinese tools over the past decade. So here's the question, why? Why are there so many cheap Chinese tools out there, and are any of these tools worth it? Now you may dismiss it offhand and say, of course not. There's no way that these cheap knockoffs can compete with my DeWalt or my Milwaukee or whatever your preferred brand is. But the truth may actually surprise you. So over the past 10 years or so, we have been flooded with cheap Chinese tools. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just go to Amazon and type in tools or drill or something like that. Here are the results that I got when I did that. You have your regular brands like DeWalt, Craftsman, and Black & Decker, but then you've got your weird brands you've never heard of, things like Avid Power or Deco Pro, High Spec, or Polituo. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. Never heard of ComoWare? Well, now you have. This one just says cordless drill on it. So what is even happening here? Well, to understand that, let's start at the beginning. During World War II, the US became a manufacturing powerhouse, mainly because most other manufacturing countries in Europe and Asia had been destroyed during the war. It's really incredible to think that during the 1950s, the US had only around 6% of the world's population, but produced nearly 50% of the world's goods. To put that into perspective today, China produces around 30% of the world's goods and has about 17% of the world's population. So the US in the 1950s was an incredible powerhouse, truly an unprecedented time for the US. And it wasn't going to last forever, it just couldn't last forever. And as manufacturing in the US became more and more expensive, US firms were looking at ways to reduce their expenses, and they looked mostly to Asia. Now, when the Chinese factories first started churning out all of this new stuff, it wasn't only cheap as in inexpensive, but it was also cheap as in of terrible quality. But that changed over time. As Europe and Asia rebuilt, they both began making more industrial products themselves, including tools. That evolution was demonstrated really nicely in the third Back to the Future movie, when Doc pulls out a microchip that failed and says, "No wonder it failed."
No wonder this circuit failed. It says made in Japan.
And Marty turns to Doc and says,
"What do you mean, Doc? All the best stuff is made in Japan."
This Doc was from the 1950s, but Marty was from the 1980s, and a lot had changed in that time frame. Today that country is not Japan, but it's China. China used to be the place that people went to for cheap labor, but now it's where companies go when they need something of quality. Listen to this clip from the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, that was recorded a few years ago.
The truth is China stopped being the low labor cost country many years ago. And that is not the reason to come to China from a supply point of view. The reason is because of the skill, the quantity of skill in one location and the type of skill it is.
Now he is talking mostly about electronics here. I mean, he does make the iPhone after all, but it also goes for other things as well, things like tools. In the past, Chinese tools were almost all garbage, but today some of the best tools are made in China. So does that mean that we should go hog wild and buy ourselves a jar owl drill? No, it does not. We should not do that. There's a lot more to it than just that. And what we really need to understand is how these factories are set up and how they're trying to steal market share away from the big tool companies. Before I get into that though, I want to take a moment to talk about this video's sponsor, Cash App. So I've got a teenager, and one of the really important things, most important things that I want to teach him is how to manage his money, which is why tools like Cash App are so important. Cash App is designed to meet the needs of teenagers with intuitive educational tools that will help them form healthy, real-world financial habits. Teenagers ages 13 through 17 can get a Cash App card with a sponsoring parent or guardian. And one of the great things is that as their account sponsor, you'll get a notice every time they make a transaction, which can really help you stay on top of things. With Cash App, there's no monthly fees and no minimum balance requirements. There's also no hidden charges when sending or receiving money. Now, for a limited time only, new Cash App customers can use an exclusive code to earn some additional cash, for real. To get the bonus, download Cash App and use the referral code CASH10 in your profile. From there, you need to send $5 to a friend within 14 days of signing up. After you send $5, you'll get $10 dropped directly into your account. So if you want to check it out, use the QR code on the screen or the link in the description below. And thanks to Cash App for sponsoring this video. Let's get back into it. All right, so let's get back to those ridiculous T-Mo commercials for just a second.
Hey boss, I'll give you $100 for this socket set.
$100? Are you sure? It's perfect for any repair job.
Awesome! How do I get one?
Easy. Just click my video and it can be yours.
The lips don't even match in this one. It's hilarious.
3 reasons why you need this mini table saw.
So there are good tools being made in China, but these aren't them. So if these aren't those tools, what are the good tools coming in from China, and how can you know? Well, to answer that, let's first talk about how China became so dominant in tool manufacturing in the first place. When brands like Stanley, Black & Decker, and Craftsman were looking to be more competitive and produce tools for cheaper, they turned to Chinese firms that were known as OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers. These were factories in China that could produce a product based upon your exact specifications. In this case, the American Tool Company still owned the designs, but left the manufacturing up to the Chinese factory. Over time, though, a lot of these factories transitioned to what is called an ODM. This is an original design manufacturer. These companies not only build their product or their tools to the specs of the tool company that they're working for, but they also design the product for the tool company. This makes it much easier for these tool companies to expand their product offerings and come out with more tools more quickly. But it also costs more. It costs for that design component that these ODMs are doing. And because the tool companies don't own the design, you end up getting a lot of tools that look very similar. Here's some examples of that. All of these tools look almost identical, and many of them likely came out of the same factory. So in essence, the colors and the branding may be different, but much of what's on the inside is the same. Now, these Chinese firms are able to do this because a lot of tools have been around for a really long time, and so patents expire, and then anyone can use the designs. Over time, though, these Chinese companies realized that they could make a lot more money if they sold directly to consumers and avoided the middleman tool company. But that's difficult for a few different reasons. First, they lacked any kind of marketing or distribution network, which would make it difficult to get their tools in front of consumers. The second is the complicated US customs rules and related duties, taxes, and fees, which could make importing tools a real headache and really expensive. Well, the first issue was solved by companies like AliExpress, Temu, and Amazon, who've created marketplaces and distribution for these kinds of sellers. The second problem was solved by a change in US law that took place in 2016. There is a section of customs law called the de minimis entry exception. This rule, which is known as the de minimis rule, allows for items of small value to be imported to the United States without any tariffs, customs fees, or duties. It was originally meant to simplify the process for American travelers returning from overseas who may have purchased small value souvenirs. And the original value of that threshold was set at $200. In 2016, though, the amount was changed to $800. And the goal at the time was to simplify customs processing, to reduce administrative burdens for low-value imports and encourage e-commerce growth. What it did in practice was that it allowed Chinese companies like Temu and Shein to sell directly to American consumers without going through the customs process. And that's when we saw this explosion of all these never-before-seen Chinese tool brands coming onto the market. So here's the thing about the de minimis rule, though. It's changing. President Trump has signed an executive order to suspend the de minimis threshold as of the end of August 2025. This means that all shipments, regardless of value, must go through formal customs entry and are subject to applicable duties, taxes, and fees. The goal of this is to prevent tariff circumvention by foreign sellers and to protect US manufacturers and retailers from being undercut by duty-free imports. And it's already having impacts across the globe. A number of countries have suspended mail shipments to the US, including places like Germany, France, the UK, and Japan, among many others. And they've done it because of the added costs as well as the confusion over the process. China, on the other hand, has not suspended shipments, but these added costs are definitely going to make the Chinese-made tools less competitive. Here's the problem, though. There are a lot of tools that we don't even make in the US anymore. And even many of the tools that we do make are really just assembled in the US from parts that come from all over the world. So even though tariffs are meant to help US manufacturers, unless all parts of a particular tool are sourced domestically, the cost of that tool and tools in general is going to increase. Added to that, tool manufacturers also need raw materials, things like steel and aluminum. And a lot of that stuff is also imported. So again, that will increase costs on US made tools. Now, I've made a few different videos on American manufacturing and on American tools, and I'll link them below in the description if you want to check them out and join the discussion there. But let's get back to Chinese tools for a second. So here's the thing. China produces 85% of all the world's tools. And so to dismiss all Chinese made tools as junk right off the bat really isn't practical. Brands like DeWalt, Bosch, Milwaukee, Ryobi, Craftsman, and many others manufacture some or all of their tools in China. On the other hand, some of these Chinese-made tools are trash. They have cheap plastic, inferior parts, terrible batteries, and loose tolerances. But that doesn't mean that all Chinese tools are junk. So how can you know if a Chinese tool is cheap and a piece of garbage, or if it's a great bargain? Well, here's a few rules that you can follow. The first is that you should avoid brands with really strange names. Jar Owl is a great example. It probably means something amazing in Chinese, but it just does not translate well. It sounds awful. If they can't spend any time or money researching and marketing, then they're probably scrimping elsewhere as well. So those are tools you probably want to avoid. Next, you want to read reviews, but be careful of the source of the reviews. Reviews on Temu and AliExpress really can't be trusted. Amazon reviews are okay, but they're not perfect. Try looking at a tool forum or sites like Reddit or YouTube, of course. Next, start with low-risk items before buying something expensive, just to make sure that you don't get hosed. And as always, buy from reputable outlets that can offer some kind of protection if the quality isn't what you expect. And lastly, remember, if the price is too good to be true, it probably is. So as a YouTuber, I get asked all the time to review tools, and a lot of them are some of these cheap tools made in China. And I almost always turn them down. But I did have a company called Find By Tool send me this thickness planer. Now I'm planning on doing a dedicated review on this planer, so watch out for that in the future, but I have to say that I was actually impressed. The best thing about it is that it has a helical cutting head, and I was having some trouble planing some wood. So this piece of wood right here, I bought a ton of it. This is reclaimed wood that I bought. It was cut on the Texas-Louisiana border about 50 years ago and was used as flooring in rail cars. And so you can see it's kind of dirty. It's been used and abused. And I was having a lot of trouble planing this piece of wood, or it wasn't just one piece, a lot of pieces, but I was having trouble planing it in my DeWalt planer. It kept eating up all of my blades, and those blades are not cheap. And I don't know exactly what the issue was. I think it probably was just dirty. It had probably a lot of like silica, sand, and just dirt and grime in it. And that made it really difficult to plane. But when I got this helical cutting head thickness planer, I was able to run the boards through it, and it just ate it up like it was butter. So again, I was really impressed with it. And because of that, I was able to make this awesome tabletop in my boys' room. Now to be clear, even though they sent me this thickness planer, they're not paying me any money. They're not paying me any money to say anything nice about it. But I am actually really impressed with it. I think that this is a great tool. And the company, although the name is pretty stupid in my opinion, is an OEM that makes helical cutting heads. And so now they're moving on to make their own thickness planers, which is a great transition, I think. And they're an example of a Chinese company that's making a great product. So again, you can find good ones out there. But I actually want to hear from you. Do you have any stories of any cheap Chinese tools that you've purchased? Maybe some that broke the first time you used them, or some that are still kicking even after years of abuse. Leave me a comment and let me know what you've seen out there. I'd love to hear about it. As always, thanks for watching. I hope that you found this video interesting, and if you did, be sure to subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.